Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Real Estate Lab podcast. Today, we're coming to you to talk about short-term rentals, and we have a guest today who has a few of them in the Austin, Texas area, and he's going to share his story. We are having some technical difficulties, so he's going to end up joining us via audio on JJ's phone. So let's go around the room and introduce ourselves before we get started. I go by Ian of Austin everywhere on the internet. Excited to have you here today.
Hello, everybody. I'm Liberty Walker, and short-term rentals. I have so many questions.
That's good.
Let's dive in.
Hey, everybody. JJ Tolentino with the Next Level Property Group at KW. Interested to talk about short-term rentals because this helps y'all with your real estate investing. And so it's good to have real estate wealth. So I'm going to introduce Tom through my phone because, again, like Ian said, we're having technical difficulties. Go ahead, Tom, introduce yourself.
Elevator pitch, Tom.
I'm Tom with Pure Realty in Cedar Park and Round Rock. And I'm a realtor, but I also own 3 short-term rentals, which may be a little bit different from what you're expecting, but we'll talk about that.
That's what's exciting. I'm excited to hear that. So don't forget, you can find us on Spotify, Amazon, Google, every other podcasting app that you're watching. So why don't we go ahead and start with just like, what is we hear STR a lot. What are your traditional definitions of STRs? Liberty, JJ, Tom, anybody? What are you thinking when somebody says short-term?
First thing that comes to my mind, Ian, is Airbnb and, VRBO. And
yes.
I mean, those are the 2 main ones I can think of.
Well, what kind of property do you think of when you think of an Airbnb property?
I mean, I think of maybe in my experience, it can really be any kind of property. It could be a single family home. It can be an apartment. It can be a casita. It can even be a room inside of a home. So the possibilities are endless there, Ian. A boat, a mattress in the backyard, you name it.
Yeah. I saw this lady, I think we had talked about it in one podcast. I saw this lady, she posted her whole house. So it was a 4-bedroom house. She was like, you could either A, rent the whole house, or B, rent all 4 of the rooms individually and the couch. So she had 6 listings on Airbnb. I was like, that is genius. Genius. Can you imagine somebody renting a couch for, let's say it's $100 a night to couch serve, but it's right downtown where you could go to ACL?
Sounds like a lot of coordinating.
Well, but the app does that. That's what makes it cool. So I think investors are really...
I've never been a host personally, but I know you have, Ian. I've heard you. You're self-proclaimed super host, right, Ian?
I am. I was a super host. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. JJ, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly what y'all are talking about. I think it could be a super creative situation. And I'm interested to hear about Tom because Tom has his fair share. If you want to talk about your Airbnb background, Tom.
Yeah, sure. And all of you, we've stayed in a number of Airbnb properties in different locations. They are single-family apartments.
I can't hear him.
Condo, studios, part of a house, whatever. But in our case, we have 3 of them now. They're all in Round Rock, and 2 of them are single-family, 3-bedroom homes. The other is a 2-bedroom duplex.
Okay, so why did you choose single-family homes? Can you explain that process in Round Rock, especially?
Well, initially, when I saw the first one, I was just looking for just a long-term rental to buy a year and a half ago, and walked into this home, and the way it was updated is a charming older 1977 home. The way it was updated and the way it was laid out just struck me that this is a great Airbnb type situation, and because of its location and a number of other things. And so we got it under contract, and we had begun to buy furniture, and COVID hit. So the short term, at least for a while, the vacation rental boom kind of withered on the vine here for a little while. So what we decided to do is go ahead and furnish it, go ahead and set it up. But rather than vacation rental, we lease it out for anywhere from 2 to 6 or even longer months, however long it takes for someone that needs to be there.
I think y'all are muted.
Oh yeah, there we go. So there are a lot of people that's a genius niche, because there's so many people that are moving here, that are buying houses, but the houses are going to take a few months for them to be able to move in. And the builders can't tell you a definite closing date. Right? So I've had multiple people where they said, "Oh, it's going to be closing," and so now you're serving that part of the market with your short-term rental. So it's not a traditional Airbnb or a VRBO like most people are thinking.
Yeah, timeline.
And in my realtor experience, I had a number of clients in that situation where they were in between homes, needed someplace to go for 2 or 3 months. Many times they have pets, they have dogs, they need or would really prefer a fenced yard. And with more people working from home and going to school from home, they need more than just a hotel suite. So it really has worked out really well, and there has been a demand for this type of property.
Now, explain. That is incredible. Go ahead, Liberty.
I was just going to say also, like, people moving here for a job, and also they want to be in the city while they search for a home. It's so important to be able to have a place to stay. So that's awesome.
JJ, do you ever do that? Do you ever recommend to your clients that they check out an Airbnb in an area before they buy in that area?
Yeah, I say rent where you would own and own where you would rent.
Great advice.
That's really clean.
And
Heather,
Tom, yeah, you want to read the comment?
HJ goes, STR sounds like a better option to an apartment when you're waiting for your home to be built. It absolutely can be, because they're a little more, I'll say a little more flexible. If you just wanted a 3-month, that's fine. And you get more space. The downside becomes if you need to extend it and they already have someone else ready to go, just like an apartment. And also the costs. What people are willing to pay for those convenience costs. Can someone talk about those convenience costs of renting short term?
Can you speak to the cost versus a traditional 12-month lease and a short-term rental? What's the price difference in that? Could you estimate?
Well, of course, understand that the short-term rental is furnished, and that increases the value of that rental quite a bit.
Yeah.
And typically there's a premium on a short-term lease as well. Even if somebody wants to rent an unfurnished home or an apartment for less than a year, then they pay a premium for that. So there's a premium to be paid for both the fact that it's furnished and the fact that it's short-term. But under the circumstances, the people we found are more than willing to pay those convenience fees and those higher prices.
Yes, I would be, because it's just, I choose convenience over headache 100% of the time.
So if someone came with their own furniture, would you remove your furniture for them?
Oh, no. No, they would need to find a home where they could lease for a short term in an unfurnished situation. That's a great question, and I'm pondering that right now because we have another home under contract, and I'm trying to decide if we're going to lease it out after we own it as just a regular long-term unfurnished rental, or like we have these others, furnished short-term, or we might consider a short-term unfurnished. But I'm not sure what kind of demand there is for that at this point.
If somebody wanted to
send people, short-term rentals? Like, is there a group Facebook there organizes rentals?
Liberty, is that chopping up for you, Ian?
Yeah,
I
it
think
is. I'll
Liberty is
ask.
asking where to find tenants for short-term rentals.
Like that question addressed to me?
Yeah,
Well,
we'd like to hear your
because I'm
experience.
a realtor, we list them on MLS, and then I also typically go to Facebook pages and our own Pure Realty page, and the way I market them is be your client's hero. We almost market exclusively to realtors, and be your client's hero, because if somebody's moving in from out of state, which is typically the situation, and that person needs a place like this, and the realtor can find it, and it really puts a feather in the cap of the realtor who's going to ultimately find a home for them to buy in this area.
I've had multiple clients that have asked me if I know of anything that's going to be around for just 3 months while the builder is building. And sometimes I'll see these posts and I try to research them, but it's been challenging. So that comes to my next question. If let's say someone was told, your house will be done by January 1st, but then it's done by November. How do you handle that type of situation?
Well, we never lease it until we know that the person before is moving out. I don't think it's at all fair if we would tell the current tenant that, hey, I don't care what your situation is, but you got to be out of here in 30 days. We just don't do that. We've had one situation where, because of just what you talked about, builders construction is delayed so much that it was 4 or 5 additional months, and we were fine to let them stay there for that additional time.
That's great. I was more referring to if the tenant, the build was done early and the tenant wanted to break the lease, if they just wanted to escape the lease a little bit early, like a reletting fee.
Well, what we've been doing is a 2-month lease with a month-to-month extension after that, which gives them the flexibility. We really would like a 30-day notice so we can market it the next time, but we're pretty flexible with allowing people to leave if they need to leave sooner.
That is just like a peace of mind for people. It's really a wonderful thing you're doing, Tom. Can we talk a little bit about, for other people that might be watching that are investors, where would you guide them to find rules and regulations? Because I know some of my clients ask me, oh, this home is so great. It would make a great investment property for short-term rentals. Can I use this for Airbnb? And I'm like, well, how do we find that out? Is it HOA restrictions, city restrictions? What do you do, Tom, to do your due diligence on a property?
Well, those are the 2 big ones for sure. Since we've stayed in Round Rock, we haven't had any issues with that. And then the HOA is a big deal. So it's best to either look for a home that's not in an HOA, which is getting more difficult all the time, or to at least carefully research the HOA rules, because there's one subdivision in particular that we looked at with newer homes, and the HOA rules said that they would not allow rentals less than 12 months. That's pretty tough. So that subdivision didn't work for what we wanted to do, and it definitely would not work in an Airbnb situation.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
I've seen that, especially a lot of the brand new communities while they're still building out, especially if they have multiple phases going on. So you're looking for properties that are not in an HOA if possible. How do people get a hold? Let's say they are in an HOA. How are you helping people get a hold of the CCNRs or whatever the regulations of that HOA is before they're offering on that home?
Yeah, well, that can be a little tricky. HOAs, as I'm sure you know, are a little difficult to get that information. Sometimes the CCRs are posted on the HOA website or the manager's website, but often that's not the case. And then you either need the help from either contacting that HOA directly, or many times title companies have access to that information, or can kind of get you in so that you can get that information in plenty of time to make a decision.
Here's what I know. I know that title companies have seen all of the HOAs, all of the guidelines, and they've received it. I don't know any title companies that'll be like, you know what, I'll send it to you, Ian. All you got to do is just tell me which HOA you want to know about. That would make my life so much easier. Liberty, what do you have pulled up here? What do you have pulled up here on the screen?
Yes, so these are the different types of properties for short-term rentals defined by austintexas.gov. So we have type 1, where the owner is occupying the property. It's a single family, multifamily, or duplex. So they are on the deed and they can prove that. And then they can apply for a license to become a short-term rental. Then we have type 2, which is maybe a tenant that's living inside of a home and then renting out their property. So there's different restrictions for that. One of these that I'm going to point out to you guys about type 2. So if you're leasing a property, you're not the owner, you're not on the deed, but you are interested in doing a short-term rental of the home that you're occupying, there can only be one type 2 non-owner occupied short-term rental in a 1,000 foot radius. So that's almost a mile around the property. That's a lot of homes if it's a neighborhood.
Well, they are trying to I think some neighborhoods are trying to minimize it, but there's so much to this. There are a lot of people that don't like the idea. So imagine if you moved in, you just bought a house for $1 million on a street where all the other houses are $1 million, and then someone buys it, rents it out, and it becomes a college party house. I mean, that's happened. This is real, right?
Or bachelorette.
Or bachelorette, yeah, something like that. Like, how does that affect the neighborhood? Tom, have you had any kind of, probably not. Can you tell us about your experience with that? And this goes for everybody, all of us. JJ?
Well, my experience is, especially with the unique way we're doing this, we haven't had any problems with parties at all, because these folks are, they've been homeowners. They're just a single family. They typically don't have parties. They typically don't have a lot of guests come in. Many times they're just new to town anyway. So it's really a different type of situation. That's one of the benefits, I guess you could say, of what we're doing. But I know that doesn't speak to the majority of STRs, which really are Airbnb weekend type situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's shifting, though, especially with the announcement, the announcement of Tesla's HQ moving here. We knew that Tesla was moving here, Samsung, all these people, but now knowing that all these people, these jobs are coming here and people will need to rent. These are engineering jobs. You can't work remote if you're physically here manufacturing or building something. So they need a place to stay, and very rapidly. So this is an excellent option.
Would y'all happen to know, is there a market that's better for short-term rentals? Is this 4 month, less than 1 year, super hot? Does that make sense? Is it competitive?
I think.
You mean is now a good time to buy one? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Like if you were an investor and you were considering doing a short term, like purchasing for short term, do you think it's a bad time or a good time? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I absolutely would not be scared of doing it right now. Our market values are still rising. They will continue to do that. And like you mentioned about the demand for people coming in and jobs and coming in quickly and needing to get into a place before they buy, if they choose to buy, I think it's an excellent time.
I love the idea of this under a year, but not a weekend, because it's like, it really does it's like you have all the benefits of a long-term lease in terms of someone occupying the home that might not just be having a party, but you also have the flexibility because the market is changing, rents are changing, and so you're not locked in for a whole year at that rental rate. You kind of move it around as you wish.
Yeah, and even as John S. says, I wish we would have known about this option. We had to extend our short-term lease twice now because of delays. Our apartment management has increased our rent by $650. Increased our rent by $650.
And John, you'd really have to crunch the numbers there because, you know, as we're talking about, there is going to be a premium with a short-term rental, but it might not. We don't know if that $650 would benefit you, you know, going into a short-term rental or not, but definitely hurts seeing your rent go up that much.
Yeah, that sucks, dude.
Sorry about that, John. Well, now you know.
Tom.
You need us. Tom's here.
Tom, how long is it taking for you to turn over a property? So let's say you had a tenant notify you today, they're moving out, and it's October 15th. How long would it take you to get another tenant in, do you think?
Well, if we have, if they're out today and we don't know until today, then it's a little tricky because we have to market it. The tricky part of this is trying to find the next tenant who can move in as quickly as possible after the most recent tenant moves out. We only need a day or two to turn it around in terms of getting it cleaned up and laundered and everything like that. But sometimes we've been very fortunate so far in not having much vacant period of time. In fact, generally it's only days between one tenant and the next. But at any given time, you don't know how many people are going to be available for it. So that part's a little bit tricky, but we can turn it around pretty quick. And I try to get it on MLS as quickly as possible.
You've never really had a dry spell, right?
Never had
Not so far.
A dry spell.
A dry spell.
All right. Kel Varnson says new communities like Whisper Valley have BTR proposed. What's BTR?
Something term
BTR
rental.
proposed for future development. Short-term rentals might be possible there, but not in normal owner-occupied phases.
Yeah, new.
So when he's talking about,
they're really making an effort to keep some homes available for people who do live here and need to work here. So I'm one point I'm like, for my investors, like, oh, why can't we buy that new home? On the other point, I'm like, I really would like to have a place for some people to buy and live in. So I can see both sides of the coin on that one.
So yeah, I want to talk about this comment for a minute. So he says it's build to rent. So what happens is you have a lot of investors that are saying a lot of new communities, and they're saying we're not allowing investors. That's not necessarily true. What they're saying instead is we're only allowing, let's say, 5 or 10% investors, but they're like a silent auction type period, right? Like you're not going to know that unless you're always calling builders and trying to find that. So it's really hard to find that. And or if a home has been sitting on the market a little bit longer. And what he's referring to when he says the normal owner occupied phases, we know that if there's a community build out, let's say it's going to be 20 phases, they'll do 1,000 homes, and then they'll work on the next 1,000 homes, and then they'll work on the next 1,000 homes. But each phase, so the first phase, that might be fully occupied with owners before they move on to the next. So he's saying future phases, maybe phase 6 in Whisper Valley, as an example, and that's just arbitrary number, but that's what he's referring to for those of you that are watching this.
Let me poke some holes at this. Is it possible that an STR investor may be left holding the bag because all this future development comes, or like apartment complexes come up? What do you think, Tom?
Well, no more so than any other type of investor. I guess the challenge is if we decided to sell one of ours, what a lot of short-term investors don't think about is the furniture and the furnishings. First of all, it takes a while to buy all this stuff, and because you have to furnish it from head to toe. I mean, what we tell people is everything is there except your toothbrush and a suitcase. Mm-hmm. Because we're furnishing it with everything. So what that means is on the exit side is if we chose to sell one of these, we would either have to sell it as a working short-term rental, or we would have to somehow dispose of all the furniture and the furnishings. And so that's where I think the risk of holding the bag would come in.
That makes sense. That's something to consider because that's thousands of dollars, right?
Yes. And
Have
there's
you
a
ever
market for furnished homes, because if somebody, especially from out of town, an out-of-town investor wanted to buy a short-term rental, it's obviously much easier to buy one that's already functioning that way. And they are available, but they're pretty few and far between.
Right on. Exit strategy is what I've heard. Think about an exit strategy if you're thinking about STRs.
Tom, when you're looking at properties, do you check the percent rental rate in the neighborhood before you purchase?
Well, as another investor, yes, I do. I always run those numbers to see what the percent is, but typically the neighborhoods that I'm looking at for investment already have a decent percentage of renters. And so in my case, it's more of looking at the neighborhood, driving down the streets, than it is being concerned about the percent of renters, since the property that I'm buying is going to be a rental property.
So if the property, let's say the neighborhood itself has, let's say 300 homes and 200 of them are rentals, that doesn't mean anything to you?
As an investor, no. And of course, that's an extreme number because I don't know of any neighborhoods that have that percentage. But I get the point. I think it just depends on, we can all drive through a neighborhood and we can tell, is this neighborhood trending up or is it trending down? And to me, that's a subjective thing. It's not an objective thing, but that's more what we look at.
I love the way you said that, trending up or trending down, not good or bad or anything like that. And that's important, knowing that we're realtors, because we can't do that. So you have to be able, like you said, it's subjective to the person. One person might think it's an incredible neighborhood and another person might say, I wouldn't live here for whatever reason. So that's trending upward or trending. I'm going to borrow that, Tom.
Do you have any thoughts for an investor that's more, or do you think there's a market for both of these? I mean, I think it's tough for me as a realtor to comp using the MLS, which is very long-term rental data, sales data. But would y'all think short term is like better, more profitable, or safer, or medium term, with the 4 to 6 months?
Let me say one thing kind of before Tom answers this, because I'm sure his answer is going to be better than mine. When we were doing the Airbnbs, I specifically wanted to do an Airbnb or short-term, right? A super short-term, because if I didn't like the thought of a particular scenario, it was an instant switch, right? Like it was only going to last a week or whatever. And then, so that was the first thing. Second, you can, like, as realtors, we're not allowed to discriminate at all, right? And so I'm like, I'm not going to put this on the MLS and then sit here and pick through renters, or like, personally, that's how I didn't want to do it. So I always think I'm going to have a property manager do it, and that's a whole process, yada, yada, yada. So anyway, I think that's something to consider when you're looking at very, very short versus a long term. But like Tom said, his experience has been very, very different.
You have any thoughts, Liberty?
I honestly am leaning towards Tom's model. It really does kind of sound like it's geared towards kind of like maybe people who are just like needing a place to live versus needing a place to partay. I don't want to clean up after those people.
Yes.
But also, if Tom just needed a place to go and party and not have to worry about his own house, he could do that too.
What do you think, Tom? You happy with your strategy? You considered anything the shorter term?
Well, we've thought about it, and honestly, on weekends like F1 or ACL or a home football game and some of the things, you wonder, boy, we could get a lot more out of this home this weekend than probably in 2 weeks of a regular rental, or maybe even more than that. But For the time being, we'll stick with our strategy. The neat thing is we could convert it to a VRBO at any time. I'm set up VRBO. I haven't pulled the plug on it, but I've got the properties there. I've got pictures in place, and so we could decide to go that direction at any moment.
Well, if you do, you'll have to update us and keep us posted because we're looking to you for guidance on this one. Sounds like you are far beyond what we've been up to in terms of the longer rentals.
I love that. So everybody, it is 3:01. We thank you for spending the time with us today. Sorry we're over time. If you have any questions for Tom, JJ, Liberty, or myself, feel free to leave them in the comments. We'll make sure to address them either today or tomorrow or sometime in the near future. And we will see you again next week. This has been the Real Estate.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in.
Have a good one.
Bye.